Hey, check this out. We got Kenoli versus Krankendau KVK, and that means it's ZVZ time. A collection of 5 replays on a new map by Veek7, Slippery Slope. Is it really a slippery slope? Well, it's still got that classic issue where I get pinged every single expansion in replay, so that's a classic move. But either way, we got KVK here, ZVZV here. ZVZ VK. VK is, of course, VKontact, which is a place that sometimes I know things happen in the Russian-speaking language, the Russosphere. So there's where we're going, I think. Kenoli in the bottom left is our Pumpkin Zerg, and Krankendau in the top right is our Maroon Zerg. And I'm looking here, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, Kenoli going to go for a very fast scout here. I thought shenanigans were afoot. But no, he's just scouting his opponent real fast. Now, Slippery Slope is, like I said, a map by Veek7. Got this little cutout here in the middle, which is kind of neat from a ground army POV. And then, of course, he's got, the natural. Actually, the distance between the main and the natural is pretty steep there as far as travel distance goes. So it does make me think that maybe drop attacks would be a bit of an impingement. We'll see if that maybe plays a factor in this mirror matchup. Krankendau going for his Kagrant into pool. Does this? I feel like this narrowly reduces mining efficiency on that top node, but it probably doesn't matter too much. Just a thought. Ooh, the offensive Kagrant! What are you going to do about that, Mr. Crank? I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a sponsored sip. I love coffee. Well, that will end up almost finishing, but then he cancels it at the last second, knowing that it was fool's gold to attempt to make a circuit right in front of it. But hey, he did drain some mining time from his opponent. So, like Krankendau kind of does need to deal with that in some way, right? I wonder if the future of people doing that kind of early scout antic, because, like, you got to factor in the fact that you're losing money when you're not mining with your early scout. It probably, and plus you lose a little bit of money when you cancel the Kagrant too. Like, I think it probably isn't too efficient or good, but it does kind of drain the psyche a little bit. So is it worth it for spiritual warfare in that way? Also, one of the things that you can do on certain maps is find a spot where your worker, you're kind of denying easy access to attacking it, or like forcing workers to waste more time. Like if he had made it behind these minerals, then all of a sudden these workers are like, only one can fit here to attack, and so on and so forth. So anyway, Zethar cores have arrived, or at least a Zeth has arrived, and it looks like he'll get a little bit of lost mining time on his own as well, with 3 HP left and a little bit of a rejoinder there as he regenerates. I'm curious as to what all these Zeths are going to be doing. They're just kind of ignoring the Crank Zeth. Looks like one of them was pinched off to deal with it. We do have 4 Quas back at home and more on the way, so I don't think Crank is in danger. By the way, normally I sort the player left to right based on the player on the left is the favorite, even if it's a narrow favorite. Normally I'd say Krankendau is a better player when it comes to macro and stuff. It's just that Kenoli has downloaded ZVZ into his brain like a software update, and he just inexplicably performs way out of his depth in that respect. Way better than you would expect. And so at this point, I have begun to expect it, right? And so that's why he's sorted above it. He is technically class 2 since the ranking update. So that is something that he can write home about. He can be like, "Ma, you'll never guess." Oh, also, Kenoli recently updated his contributing code to one of the little things that we've got going on where he's trying to update the minimap rendering. So I'm not sure what the protocol is there, because I know that Veek wants to confirm it. Ooh, body block. Nice catch. Veek wants to confirm that the code is worth, what would you say, designed in the right way or written in the right style and all this other stuff, right? I know that Kenoli has been maintaining a PR or whatever, so we'll see how that one goes. Pull request for those who are not PR-ified, Gitified. You get, but yeah, it's interesting. Shout out to Kenoli for contributing. He's making his maps, he's been doing his code, and he's been taking ass and kicking names. Now, the Vornath is on the way here, and as well as the Zorka is nearly finishing up, is going to give Kenoli a nice little tech advantage over Krankendau, but Krankendau now already has his Izira cores, right? So he's going to crush pool for the time being, and he's doing so, both players doing so on one base, I might add. Looks to me like maybe, Krankendau wants to change that. Kenoli, on the other hand, is having a rough time of it, right? Just a little bit of bounce attack here and there. Yeah, get nice and close. Hit all 3 of them at once. See? That adds up. Think of all those moving shots. Think of all those Zoryus. Meanwhile, a couple of Zeths on burrow from the natural mineral line there, and Kenoli strikes on the worker count, getting a lot of damage. But remember, he's down by almost 10 workers, right? So that had to do more damage, it felt like. Now, he's got a flank of Quaz over here that he might be able to use. It looks like Krankendau has spotted that, and he's going to see if he can dive on out, because he knows that the Iziracore versus Zoryus matchup does not favor the Iziracore. Let's just put it to you that way. I mean, the Ensnare is going to be absolutely absurd, but you have no armor rend, you've got no damage. You can hardly focus a single one of them down, one of them on death's door, but not actually going to get finished off. And so the Rillarocore spawn is just going to be absolutely absurd. Crank never managed to put down his hatch, and he is making 1 Hydra and 7 Iziracores. So I don't know if the penny has dropped for exactly what is going on here, but you need more Hydra than Iziracore to deal with that comp by a considerable margin. Kenoli going to go ahead and take the tempo by gunning for that Expo, and the worker here from Mr. Crank is indeed going to fall on back. I actually do think that the distance of the natural is playing a significant impact, having a significant impact in the... Whoever has tempo is disproportionately more likely to get the Expo, at least in this ZVZ mirror. But I would say it's probably true for all of them. Like, it almost feels like the Expo should be nestled into this corner, but then, of course, there'd be other concerns. Either way, Krankendau's going to have to make do with it. He's got a couple of Hydras rallying forward. Now, you'll notice there's not really much catch potential here for Kenoli's army. He doesn't have a lot of DPS, but he doesn't need a lot of DPS when he's got so many Rillarocores, when he's got, of course, the ability to catch these Hydras. One of them does end up going down. Now, 1 Zoryus also goes down. Once these Hydra counts get to a better degree, we can actually see a little bit more value out of that. But as of right now, he's clumping up his army versus the Rillarocores that are ensnaring everything. It's not the best choice, all things considered. The Zoryus still not falling. Where are the focus firings from Krankendau? Looks like right now, he's struggling a little bit, but again, the Zoryus are so beefy, right? Now, he's going to go ahead and go for his expansion. Better late than never. Obviously, the one for Kenoli is already hatched, but he's not really doing too much behind this. Zoryus does end up getting bodied. One of the changes that we made to incubation means that even if the Zoryus takes fatal damage, it still spawns a Rillarocore, which just adds to the problem of the Rillarocore being disproportionately too good, right? So that's something that we still have yet to address and balance, but we'll think about it. As of right now, Kenoli does seem like he's in a little bit of trouble, but this force is a little bit smaller than Krankendau would probably want it to be. He might still be able to arc forward and finish the job, but remember, ZVZ is a lot more defender's advantage than StarCraft 1, because you've got all of those spawning units, and they can definitely hold their own. Plus, you think about cliff advantage, not factoring into this particular match. We do have an ocean of Hydras coming out as well. Only 3 Zoryus in production here for Kenoli, so he will be sent back to the 1 base edge if Krankendau even bothers to continue attacking it. He's going to now charge the front. This is a more devastating attack for sure. And Kenoli only now spending his money does feel like a little bit of a misfire. But he has an ocean of Nathracores he's been prepping this whole time. He's not attacking the Spraith. And it looks like the Hydras are on move command onto a larva. So mistakes on both sides, really. But as of right now, can these workers do their job? I'm not so sure. A lot of workers have died for Crank. So this is all he's got coming back into it. And the problem that I see with this is that you're going down to 16, 15, dropping on those Naths. Yes, you've finally broken the hatch, but you can't finish the job that way. And I'm not even sure that many Naths is going to be able to deal with this many Hydras, and that hatch is going down. Then, okay, that one is still alive and intact a little bit there, so that's something. How many Naths do we still have? 12, by the way. Okay, well, the Larvosks are definitely dead. If he had finished the job on this hatch, it would have been a bit different, but then the timing of everything else would have been different too. Trying to engage with everything at once, now you're going to see a little bit of a stutter step action here from Krankendau's Hydras. I still feel like he would have just had a better shot if he just decided to attack move it, to be honest, but admittedly, the Nathracores do rend 1 armor, and so that would have made the Quaz a little bit more efficient, right? So, yeah, okay, the Naths do end up clearing the deck there, and now we are into a very silly situation. More Hydras and Iziracores are on the way. Krankendau never unburrowed his workers. He's still got 9 workers, but he's not actually using them. Will he recognize that? Does he even remember? Like, you know, you can see the Droleth kind of poking his head out there, but... Yeah, I think this force should still be enough. I mean, he's got 2 Izira cores. They deal really nicely with the Naths. And the Naths aren't even coming back, so... I'm going to go ahead and say that it's looking pretty difficult for Kenoli to defend here. I think he definitely needed to pull the Naths back. Yeah, that was that was a little bit of a rough one. Okay, well, you know, Krankendau gets bamboozled by the Kenoli Nath stack. They don't do as much damage as they used to, so there is that. Let's see what happens in game 2. Same spawns as before. Pumpkin Zerg in the bottom left is Kenoli, and Krankendau is our Maroon Zerg in the top right. So we run it back. We do it again. No Kagrant first this time around, but, you know, Kenoli did post these replays with the addendum, or like the subtitle, the caption, ZVZs to expand Krankendau's mind, something like that. I think after that game, your mind is definitely expanded. If your mind is being expanded by watching Cosmonarchy, be sure to drop a sub on the channel, give us a like on the video, throw a comment in saying, is this your first cast, or your 11th, or your 3000th? Let us know. But also, of course, feel free to jump into our Discord server. If you want to play with the homies, you want to get some games in, you want to play some co-op, you want to just, you know, talk about the game in general. Just, you know, that's the best place to do it. So, Krankendau is going to be going for a pool into a Kagrant. That's an interesting option because it does make it a bit more military-minded. I did talk about this in the last cast, actually. Hit 'em up versus Crank. I was talking about how the cast for... basically, like, one of the things you can do in the openings is you can go for a pool before your Larvosk, and if you do something like that, it just means that your first military unit does come out a little bit faster at the slight cost of your economy, because you usually get 1 or 2 less workers with that kind of opener. Now, what I think is significant about this, as far as a difference maker is concerned, is that I do believe that when we're looking at the way that ZVZ goes, you definitely want a little bit more on the military side a little bit earlier, right? It's still not as gangster as when I saw the Night Fox versus Art of Turtle on Genesis Y in their qualification series into Acropolis number 2 battlement stage. I remember seeing that the Night Fox went for an 8 pool, and he delayed turning his Kagrant into a Larvosk in case he needed it to be a Circuith for defense. That was gangster, man. That was like... That was some serious shit, because he has mapped out ZVZ to the point where he has a build that counters the 6 pool. And counters it handily, too. So just seeing that, I was like, God damn. So, round of early military units just kind of gathering around the Larvosk like it's a dumpster fire, or a trash fire. Dumpster fire is very different. You don't gather around that, it usually smells. But, Zeth is going to go ahead and scout. Sees no expansion, though. Didn't actually check it. One of the maps where you have to deliberately scout the expo in order to see it, instead of just, you know, what would you say, coincidentally scouting it by circumstance. Very fast Hydrith, so Kenoli seems to be going up against a player who actively wants to make Izira cores, and you know, that just makes my heart feel so so full of love, because nobody likes the Izira core, but they're pretty good. So, they did recently get like a plus 30 HP buff, which helps. Now these quads are going to be dragged back there, so they are not going to be as efficient, and this guy is just going to get gunned down as a result, so that is not ideal. We do have an Ovoleth here. I don't know if that means that we're going to see a drop, or if it's just going to be for scouting. Looks like it's just earmarked for scouting, because this Zeth is unlikely to see too much other than, you know, a bunch of quads marching towards him before he gets, you know, gatted by them. Zerg, zerg, zerg. Here, here, here. What do we got? 3 Izira cores on the way. Yeah, that checks out. I mean, that's a pretty good composition to just muscle your way into a position held by a bunch of pool units. 3rd Larvosk on the way, so we are going to go up to 4 larvae every 14 seconds. That will be the larva advantage, of course, for Kenoli. We'll see what he wants to do with that. Workers have been dead even so far, so that's kind of an interesting thing to note, but Kenoli is getting a lot more on the way. Krankendau setting himself up for a big muscle attack with all those Izira cores he's making. Not really the same deal for Kenoli. He is vulnerable to something like that, but if the game goes long, if Krankendau doesn't immediately move out with those 6 Izira cores, or however many he's going to end up with, that is definitely going to be a benefit to Kenoli. He's got a lot of money in the bank, and he's not actually making anything with them. There we go, a bunch of Zeths. I mean, that barely hits the dent, you know, that barely dents the economy. That might help him. I mean, you know, when these when the Azerikar count is still like, sub 10 or whatever, you can kind of approach them with large pool armies. It's just very, very cost inefficient. And then eventually you get to the point where it's like, goddamn, I have nothing that could even touch this. And so that's usually when the Azerikar count is like 9, 10, 11, stuff like that. So right now we're not at that point yet. Krankendau just muscling on through with what I believe is 6 Azerikars. Big surround planned over here. And remember what I said where you can approach them as long as the number isn't too big. Well, some of those Azerikars weren't even in the fight, and so they will end up being torn asunder, but not before they clear up just about every single Zethrakor. Now that leaves with some Quas, some Vorvs, and the next round of engagements is going to favor Kenoli because of that macro advantage there. Although I say that, Krankendau has been drolling behind that. He just hasn't taken an expansion, so his workers' saturation is a little bit overdone right now, which just means that he's not going to be getting as much value as Kenoli will for the next few workers that he makes. It's just pure Azerikar coming out here. And remember that Vorvikors don't really do that much damage. So they are applying Ensnare, they are rending the armor, but that was maybe a little bit of an audacious play to go for that attack before the Quas were there. Because when the Vorvs rend the 1 armor for the Azerikar, the 1 armor pen of the Quas basically means that they deal full damage to them. Whereas previously they're going to be doing 4 damage per hit, they actually deal their full 6, which is a very, very big difference with enough Quas actually attacking. Either way, though, it looks like Kenoli is going to go ahead and start distance mining from his natural. Narrowly seizing the worker advantage here. Has that hatch already halfway complete. And it looks to me like Krankendau is going to go for the Kagrant aside his hatch. I'm not sure what that's going to be for. He already has 1 Spraith. Maybe he's thinking about a second one. Hasn't scouted the recommittal into a ground army from Kenoli. I wonder, did he get close enough to scout the Vornath? It doesn't really matter because he saw the Vorvikors, but I'm trying to mentally map out when exactly he might have put that Spraith down. So the Azerikars are going to go ahead and force back the top spoke of Kenoli's army. Reinforcements coming on in, some static defense going to be placed down, and then the workers are going to get to mine and crack-a-lack-it on that harvesting. Meanwhile, the Azerikars have indeed approached the Ramp of Death. You definitely don't want to be fighting up that choke. There's so much surface area, plus the 1 extra weapon range. Yeah, it's a bit brutal. He can pick that Vorv, that's fine. But anything else? Maybe not. Getting a lot of Hydras out, though. Crank staying on 1 base. It's a little bit unlike him. But, oh my god. Yeah, his Ovoleth is going to come in here and see a tier 2 structure. Maybe not. It might actually turn away before he clicks on it. That's placed like maybe it's just static defense. You can't tell visually based on that. That's something we want to add later on for... Maybe that's something I'll try to do before the end of January, right? Before the next update. Is add something like that visually changes the construction animation. I guess I could maybe take the really big one and try to downscale it. It would probably just look a bit ugly. I'm trying to think about ways to do it more elegantly. Kit bashing and all that. Now, Azerikars are going to be able to actually get on top of this position now, and you can see where if you have enough of them, you don't mind losing a few, plus you've got those Hydras for sustained damage in the back, you can absolutely muscle through. Maybe Krankendau could have done that muscle move a little bit earlier, in fact, but either way, he's going to do it now. The problem is there's 4 circuits, so without some kind of artillery or, maybe Bactylisks or something to at least soften up the ground army that you're going to be fighting alongside the circuits, maybe Zorius as well could be a really nice fit here. And of course, Lake is because there's no detection from his opponent. That definitely could work out nicely. Ovoleth coming in now, sees the Iral Iris, and Krankendau's probably going to be thinking, dude, I'm on 1 base versus 2 and tier 2. What the hell am I supposed to do from this position? The answer is take an expansion. He does have map control. Looks like he'll be trying to take a second expansion as well. Yeah, double expanding at this point is probably the best thing that Krankendau can do. He's also adding another hatch in the main to get up to 4 larvae per 14 seconds. He was thinking about taking that base, but it looks like he's reconsidered. No, he's actually sending it all the way back home. Just doesn't have the money, I guess. Saving up a lot of cash right now is Kenoli. His Calcure Lake just finished, so he's going to go ahead and make a ton of Lyrilisks. 22, in fact. He's earmarked the others for a few mutations as well. I can see the writing on the wall, ladies and gentlemen. This will be Kenoli answering back in the set, almost certainly. I really cannot imagine the Lyrilusk-fueled armada that is about to hit quite heavily here. I can't imagine it doing anything but winning. A Gosvaleth being made? Oh no. I wonder what that's for. He's probably just going to expand with it. Is this before or after I nerfed it? No, yeah, it still has 2 armor pen. That's funny. Now, this Quaz was moved up to stop the third base from being taken, and indeed, it is going to got. This Hydra is on a patrol route, and so if this Goswelleth... yeah, I guess this Goswelleth will indeed get stymied there. Well, maybe not. I don't think he even noticed it. All right, the Lyrilusc is going to go ahead and muscle on. They're going to force a cancel on the third base. My prediction is that the army will be wiped relatively fast with all of these Lyriluscs. Like, as soon as you scout that many Lyriluscs, you must just be kind of shitting your pants there. Maybe if you go for a counterattack is, like, the best option for you. But Kenoli's already shown a predilection towards going for the ridiculous base races. Now, the Lyriluscs are kind of, like, this is as nice an engagement Krankendau can probably hope for. I love the burrow there as well because, you know, once this army gets cleared, it's not even going to be able to muscle through the choke, though. That's the problem, is the bounce attacks are just too good. And, you know, Krankendau did his best, but he can't really do much there, so that is GG. And Kenoli posts up a dub on the board. See? I told you guys. Kenoli downloaded ZVZ. He's got some ideas. That last game was more due to execution than anything, but the one we just watched, nice. Get your base up faster, get your tier 2 up ridiculously fast, set on pool only. You know, the only gas he expended was Larvosks and Vornath. Yeah, tell me about it, lads. All right. I think what we can do is we can do one more, and then the final 2 matches of the series will be in a separate video. So let's see what happens in Game 3. We are running it back. Same spawns again. Krankendau is our Maroon Zerg in the top right, and Kenoli, Pumpkin, in the bottom left. So, what are we going to end up seeing from the adaptations here from these games? Now, I believe there were a bunch of games. I think there. Let me go ahead and read the description of this set of replays. Yeah, games to expand Krankendau's mind. Yep. There were also a couple more where he ran me over with a 6-pool, but I'll just let you imagine what those looked like. Hey, I think it would have been nice to get 1 or 2 of those in the set. I mean, just for flavor, you know, just to let Krankendau get some more dubs on the board. But let's see, Kenoli going for Hydrith first. We're already seeing a little bit of variety there. Krankendau going to be going for the pool into the Kagrant again, it looks like. Interesting stuff. So I do really want to see what happens with the matchups here, and you know, as we get more grinders, as we get even more people fully active and going for it, you know, I think there's some real cool things that we can end up doing for the game and seeing as far as strategies go. You know, it does take me back, right? I was reflecting on this at the end of the year, how Cosmonarchy was never really intended as a 1v1 game. Like, I kind of look at Starcraft 1 and I think to myself, it's already like the one with the most storied background. Probably you could just say the best 1v1 RTS experience out there. You know, some people will maybe say that Age of Empires 2 is better, and to that I say you just like a different kind of RTS game that's a little bit less on the combat side and a little bit more, you know, like the faction design is completely different. Now, again, I'm not an expert in Age of Empires the way that I'm an expert in StarCraft 1. So, you know, feel free to disregard my point. But what I'm basically getting at here is just that StarCraft 1 already has this fully entrenched position in most people's minds that most people that play this kind of RTS game as the best that you're going to get out of an RTS in a 1v1 aspect. And so I was targeting team games and FFAs and crazy stuff and obviously campaigns and whatnot. And you know, to see that 1v1s have been taking off as like a cool game when it wasn't even really initially envisioned for that, you know, it's kind of interesting. It's funny. You don't make a plan for the future of your life. Your life happens in a certain way. So the Zets are going to go ahead and spot out the Iziracore rush. This is 4 Iziracores. Krankendau did make a Hydrith den pretty fast, so he's uniquely able to respond to this threat, I think. He's going to try for a Circuit on the front line, and that's going to be a Circuit to fall back to. We're going to see how that one plays out, of course. Let's see. We've got only 6 Quas versus this many Iziracores. Feels like it's going to be a difficult ask for him. He's going to go ahead and fall back to the Circuit, let the Circuit help DPS and maybe absorb some of those blows. The Quas are drawing pretty low. The first Iziracore is down, though, and look at that, focusing down the fire on there. He's now going after the workers. Feels like he might be able to get 1. Yeah, okay, he pulls off 1 worker kill out of all of them, and of course forces the burrow. But I think based on how low Kenoli's economy had been this whole time, it actually feels to me like, oh, he also made a Circuit. Yeah, no kidding. So that it feels to me like Kenoli is a little bit further back down based on where he wanted to be. He wanted that to do more damage. And, you know, I wonder if, like, you can't DPS buildings down with Iziracores. You need, like, an astronomical amount. So I do wonder if maybe going for the worker count and shrugging off the quaz hits because they barely do any damage anyway, and just doing as much damage to the workers as you could wouldn't have been a better move. But Krankendau did wisely burrow his units, and you can't bounce on targets you can't see, so you would have had to do some really interesting hold position like spots on with the Azir cores to still get worker kills there. He only gets one worker kill. He did narrowly have a worker advantage. As we can see, that has absolutely evaporated with Krankendau macroing up a little bit better. And, you know, it's even on the larva production, but that won't be true for very long, as this Larvosk is on the way, about halfway complete there. Kenoli going for Hydras. He's got a little Vanguard over here by his ramp. That one Qua's not going to get too far as a result. And if you got up to, say, you know, 12, by the way, Hydras, and you were able to get a little bit further up there with maybe a little bit of Azir cores just to tank, I would love to see Kenoli try another attack. Because I do think that, you know, the investment into extra circuits is going to slow down the, you know, sizable amount of economy and, of course, unit production that you might end up seeing out of Krankendau. But you need to attack sometime soon, or you will be overrun by the extra larva, by the extra 4 workers, now 3. And, of course, Kenoli is making workers behind this, so he isn't all in. But this is a position for, as far as I can see with perfect knowledge, this looks like Kenoli should all in from this spot if he wants to win. I don't know if he can bounce back from a macro deficit. He would have to rely on Krankendau not playing optimally there, which you never necessarily want to do, but maybe you can sort of trust that. Now, the Hydras are already on the high ground, but now they're going to go ahead and flee. And I guess that does make some sense, but I don't know. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, you know, could he actually stand and try to fight this, or at least take some pot shots at the Zets that are chasing outside of everything else? The answer right now is, okay, it looks like he was thinking about that. Hydras did get a buff to their responsivity recently. They don't have as much of a wind-up on their attack anymore, so you can stutter step with them a lot easier. That was like pretty much the only buff that I felt like I needed to give them. They do move a bit faster as well. And the reason for that is because they already deal pretty good damage in my mind. Yeah, of course, okay, they don't have armor pen, right? But they do pretty good damage for a tier 1 unit, and they're about hitting and running and you know, hunter-killering, you know, seeking them out. Let's see if the Azir cores that did end up getting made by Kenoli are going to be enough to hold the line here. It looks like no, it's already collapsed, Kenoli falling back. You know, that trade ends up going pretty well for him. He clears out most of the Zets, if not all of them. Yeah, it looks like all of the Zets and 1 or 2 Azir cores, but he does lose a Hydra and an Izzy of his own. Now falling back to his ramp. No expansion for either player just yet. Both very aggro. Worker count pretty close, actually. Krankendau hasn't made another worker since he got 14. Leading with that Hydra might have been a mistake there, but Krankendau, oh man, he's trading down his military. I definitely favor Kenoli's position here. He's got way more on the Hydra count, and his Azir core stay alive long enough to soften up all those quas and bounce damage out everything else. So yeah, it looks to me like Krankendau's going to have to fall back to a more defensive posture and maybe consider about how he can hold the counterattack and hopefully take an expansion. So that is a situation, right, where if we're trying to think about like optimal play versus not, like what do you get out of this situation? He's got to focus down that 1 Azir core, or try to. It's so tanky. There you go. He brings it down. Now seeing if he can engage onto it with his own Azir cores there, but yeah, it's not enough. It's just not enough of a trade. I think he needed to fall back immediately, and he could have still held. As of now, I mean, I guess the circuits will make it a little bit awkward for Kenoli to win the game right here and now, but he's taking his expo. He's got loads of money in the bank that he can use for workers, and of course another hatch. And yeah, I mean, I just don't see how Kenoli could drop this one at this point, right? Like, I was saying earlier that it felt like Krankendau had the macro advantage. I wasn't expecting him to move across the map and try to win the game. That was maybe like a misunderstanding of the larva timings or something. I'm curious. And Krankendau always leaves a comment, so maybe he can tell us what he was thinking in this game. Because this one looked like, okay, I've reposted the Azir core rush. Maybe he doesn't realize how far behind that usually puts you, economically speaking. And then, you know, he might have felt added pressure because he made do 2 circuits, right? But he only lost 1 worker. I don't know. There's things about that to me, I'm like, oh yeah, Krankendau's looking pretty good here. And then, you know, he goes across the map and ends up losing his army advantage because of the Remax from Kenoli, right? Who's now going for a ski-backed. So this is either Bactals or Skiths. I'm guessing it's going to be Bactals. Even after the Skith buff recently, most people aren't really checking them out too much. They are a bit tankier now. I would say a bit. It's like 40 health or something. I can't remember how much it was of an increase, but it was pretty big. So it looks like with the Remax here, Krankendau is going to go ahead and cut off Kenoli's retreat path. Nice there, catching him slipping. And, you know, he's still going to be able to trade down a little bit there, but Kenoli is definitely going to have to fall back. Now, again, what did we learn from the last round? You should probably hold your ground and expand. But he's going to try for an attack, and you know what? Kenoli doesn't spend his money very quickly. So it might even be a good thing to attack from this position, even though from a theory perspective against, like, say you're fighting against Hit 'em Up, you know, and Hit 'em Up is doing his thing. Oh no, that blocks this mineral field. You know, say you're doing all that and you're up against the platonic ideal of a Cosmonarchy player. That's not something you would want to do. Either way, the circuits are going to finish off at pretty much the perfect time here. The hiders are going to dive in and try to avoid being caught up by all that damage, but yeah, Krankendau realizes, damn, I attacked, and I shouldn't have. You know what? That was the second time that game. All right, well, Kenoli, perhaps to some people's surprise, but not the Night Foxes, and not really even my own, is now leading in the series. Remember, I don't know how many 6 pools there were where he just got run over, so, you know, maybe we can ask somebody to give us the tally of those, and so that we can inflate Krankendau's score at the end of the series when we cast the last 2 of the this set tomorrow. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you guys then for more Crank versus Kenoli ZVZ action. The mirror matches are bloody. This is definitely the bloodiest mirror match, or the bloodiest matchup in general. So I hope you guys like some catch-up. I don't. I hate it. GG.